Okay, we're live for the latest edition of the Data Value Show. Today we're going to talk about enhancing knowledge networks and plenty of other things as well. I'm excited to have Dan Enrichment on the show to share his knowledge on these things. So, hey Dan, how you doing?
Good, Chris. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Surviving these mean data streets, as I say. Yeah, so
I'm a little bit concerned though. One, where is your vest, and two, where is your Dunkin' Donuts?
yeah, I know. I'm letting the side down, aren't I? Really, I should have, being British, have my cup of tea instead. Really, with my Twinings tea.
Trying to keep you safe out there on those mean data streets.
Exactly. It's tough out there, and yeah, navigating them is always a challenge. But I suppose with the advice from you, it's gonna be useful as well. So I think, well, first of all, we should give yourself an introduction because anyone in New York probably knows you from the scene, but for anyone else that may not do, you try to give yourself an introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to appreciate you having me on. And my background, my career's been largely focused around primary research services, both for business decision making as well as investment decision making. Started off my career in a very qualitative form of research at expert networks, which I imagine many listening are familiar with from getting those types of expertise requests. And then I saw a trend of a lot of clients starting to incorporate more and more data into their research process, and made a jump over to the data world about 6 years ago now. Had been a data user before myself, but really went into the world of companies where data is actually their asset and their product that they provide. Did a couple of stints in the financial data space, and then most recently, before starting my own company, which I'm excited to tell you about, I was leading up data strategy for Henry Schein, so large medical and dental products distribution company, and very different there in terms of data is not the core product of the company, but some tremendous opportunities, and got to work on some really cool initiatives there. So kind of been around the space as you know, and you can see behind me, I have my newsletter, which I think we'll probably talk about. Do a bunch of advisory work, and yeah, always like to meet up with you, Chris, for a pint and to talk about data at some of the low key data happy hours.
Yeah, so it's a great community over here, and yeah, vice versa. I always enjoy the discussions and debating of how data is pronounced. Is it data? Is it data? And I see you've been keeping a leaderboard over there of how the world is doing, and who's winning at the moment? Is it the daters or the data? Yeah, the daters.
Definitely the Datas.
Good.
That's how I pronounce it. But as you've informed me, what did you say? New Zealand, I believe it's
Yeah,
typically
it's a southern hemisphere seem to always go for the other route. They're always daters, not datas.
Yeah. Either way, however you choose to pronounce it, I think there's many other battles to fight in the data or the data world that I'm excited to chat with you about.
Definitely, I always like to say they're bigger fish to fry. So yeah, you can go. Like I've given up saying if it's tomato or tomato. So look, we can let these things go, and we can focus on solving some real world problems. But yeah, let's talk a little bit more about your newsletter. So I see the content going out there. It looks like it's probably quite a bit of work to go and get all that information, but it's very valuable and insightful stuff. So what made you start that, and how can people get to see it if they aren't seeing it already?
Yeah, sure. So to answer the first question, I actually put the URL up there. It's pronounced data.beehive.com, beehive with 2 I's. And that'll get it delivered to your inbox. I also often cross post on LinkedIn, which is actually how it started. Initially, it was a friend's company had raised a funding round. The following week, there was an acquisition, another fundraise, and a C-suite people move, and was just kind of giving people a shout out on LinkedIn, and it really became a weekly thing, and then moved it over to an email format, and been covering now for about 3 years. M&A, funding, people moves, upcoming events, interesting articles, regulatory announcements, kind of whatever I think is relevant and relevant to my audience around the data and broader information services and market research space. And it's been the time that goes into it is actually one of the perks for me. I really truly enjoy reading about all these different moves and seeing what's going on and engaging with a bunch of the companies and the people that I mentioned in there. So it's been a ton of fun, and really excited to continue growing it.
Yeah, it really does give a bit of a pulse on what's going on in the world, because you see the number of movements, you see the number of investments, and the number of acquisitions. You can get a bit of a sense of where the industry is going. So yeah, it's really good to to get to see the movers and shakers, as we say. So I think there's plenty of stuff for us to talk about. I think when we start the journey on business strategy, data strategy, how the two fit together. How do you see the relationship between the two of these strategies?
Yeah, so I actually, and I hope this isn't too controversial, or though maybe I hope it is.
The right place. This is where it all
I've
happens.
seen so much talk about like the chief data officer role and data teams, and the advice a lot of people are talking about is just they need to connect to the business. They need to be part of the business, and I just never really thought about them as two separate things. I always approach even data strategy. I've generally approached as from more of a corporate strategy lens, but with a focus on data and building out data initiatives in an organization. And that means everything from getting involved in corporate development and acquisitions and how you think about growth organically and inorganically, to hiring an HR, to org structure design, to product, to new market entry, kind of all the things from a traditional corporate strategy playbook. I think when you direct those towards data and utilization of data in an organization, it gets the term data strategy, but really it's tied directly in with the business and should be tied directly in with the business strategy. And so I definitely feel for the CDOs, and I think I was just reading an article this morning about CDOs having to prove their ROI, and I think there's kind of a very sort of unfair bar put on chief data officers and data teams broadly within organizations, but I like to think of them as the same thing. I mean, the data strategy should be part of the business strategy, and I think it can actually be looked at through sort of a business lens. I tend to not even think of the two separate, but look at it more as corporate strategy, but with a focus on data.
Yeah, I'm 100%, and I agree with everything you're saying there. Is that the data strategy is just one facility helping to drive your business strategy. Unless you are just a data company, then maybe it is your only one that's driving your business strategy. But yeah, most
and the reality is, to add on to controversial statements, and not speaking about any of the organizations I've worked at, but just kind of what I've seen throughout the space, and I think this will resonate with a lot of people in all different functional areas, is a lot of businesses don't really know what their strategy is. They know where they want to go. They set a certain target, or they're told a certain target by their parent or owner or investors, but they don't really have a clear strategy, or they haven't necessarily conveyed that strategy clearly to the organization. And so sometimes it's hard to figure out where you fit in with that. Not to say they all don't have a strategy. I'm sure plenty of people do, but every organization is a little bit different. And I've seen a lot where there's pressure on the data team to come up with a strategy and be very clear, and have very clear ROI and measurability. And that just doesn't end up applying to many other functional areas, which I just find unfair, I guess is the word.
Yeah. No, I think I've talked a lot of in the past around where the CDO reports to in an organisation structure. So a CDO reporting to a CTO or a CIO. Your hands are really tied anyway, because you can only do whatever the CTO or CIO believe are the right things to do. So you're under you're under their control, really, of what you can achieve. Reporting to the CFO, if your company is very much focused on a financial aspect, maybe you might have a bit more chance of succeeding if the CFO has the budget to fund it and the belief in what you're doing. But then, I mean, ideally, we want to get to the stage where the CDO is reporting to the CEO. but it just doesn't happen. That CDO role hasn't been given enough bites really to be seen to warrant that. And maybe there's some companies, anyone out there know companies where the CDO reports the CEO? I'd be interested.
Where I worked in the past, so we reported into the office of the CEO,
Okay.
and very much in collaboration with the technology organization. I think overall, it really comes down to the people and the personalities and kind of the overall mandate and culture. And we had a great relationship with the technology team. We didn't really have to think about that as much
That's
of
great.
is the reporting structure getting in our way. But we did report into the office of the CEO. And I agree. I don't think that happens as much.
No. Mm.
It definitely, I think, lets everyone know in the organization that data is a priority. But at the end of the day, I think it really comes down to who are the individuals and how are they working together, and is everyone rowing in the same direction? And I guess I've been fortunate that I've worked for some companies where we did have that type of environment.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to think about that, and regardless of the org structure and where they sit, are the personalities, the mandates aligned, and is everyone kind of working along? Going back to the business strategy, what is
Yeah.
the business strategy? Where does technology fit into that? Where does data fit into that? Where does HR fit into that? Where does operations, supply chain? Like everyone plays a key role
Yeah.
in that. I don't think it always has to be in either or.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. Is hierarchies unfortunately um, uh, limit us or actually stifle innovation sometimes. So, being able to step back from that and just go back to what the business, if the business strategy is defined, what you're actually trying to do as a company, rather than you know who's got the budget for this, and whether you should upgrade Salesforce or whether you should stay on the NetSuite version you're on, or whatever decisions you need to make. I think the other thing you said, companies not having a business strategy and or data strategy. Well, I've probably seen many companies have a data strategy, but they haven't even based it on a business strategy. They've just gone through again. Oh, okay, we're going to get Kafka here, we're going to get this technology here, and what's going through it? Oh no, this is just a technology to deliver whatever you want, but we don't know what we want. So why are you defining everything? Yeah, so I think if a company is on the stock exchange, or it has shareholders, there will be a shareholders agreement and shareholder statement that's been made at the last board meeting. In there, you can probably distill or go and get what your business strategy is, because you should, the CEO is going to promise certain things. We're going to get you more customers. Oh, okay. We're looking at customer acquisition. Oh, we're going to need to reduce costs in this area. Okay, right. So you can reverse engineer what your strategy is from statements that have been made by the chair of the company or to the shareholders. So I think that's always a good place to start. If no one's formally we can't find where a company's business strategy is, an organization, go to the last public relations statement that's been made, and you should better find it.
Incredibly helpful from an outside perspective, especially if you're doing things like competitive intelligence. You're just trying to understand kind of where the market's moving, looking at the sentiment from publicly traded competitors in the space, just as investors would look at a company from the outside. That said, I think if you work at a company and you're finding out about the strategy from a public earnings call, there's probably other communication flaws within the organization if that's the first time you're hearing about it. But to your point, you can kind of start with that strategy and then back into, or sort of reverse engineer, where does data fit into that? And to what you said before about switching to Kafka and sort of the technology side, I mean that's sort of a tale as old as time. I mean that happened in the early 2000s with technology functions and under the CTO, where people wanted to move to different things, and happen again with the cloud, and movement to the cloud, and then some people started moving back. So I think always important to avoid whether it's data for data's sake or technology for technology's sake. Always just having a why. Why are we doing this? How does this align with what we're trying to do? How does it make us better off in the future? What's the opportunity cost? What happens if we don't do it? I think that's another big thing. One of my favorite line in quotes is, what happens if we train our people and then they leave? And the response to that is, what happens if we don't train them and they stay? So I think always kind of asking as well, what happens if we don't do this? And what are the implications of that? There are plenty of great systems in use, especially at large companies that, and most very large companies are not on the cutting edge of technology. They're too risk averse and do things at very large scale. And there's a lot of other competing priorities. It takes a while, and you can't just kind of chase shiny objects all the time. And some things work, and there is a bit of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But that said, I think there's probably a healthy medium that companies can meet at, and really just making sure that they're future-proofing their organization from a technological standpoint, from a data standpoint, so they actually can achieve all the other things they say they're going to do, whether that's sales and marketing or operational efficiency. Almost all of those things nowadays, especially, end up coming back to some form of technology and data.
Yeah, I always like saying there's always a do nothing option, and whenever I'm giving options for for decisionings, the first one's do nothing, and I think that really helps frame any decisions that get made. And it's cool, you don't have to do anything, but these are negative consequences by doing nothing. We agree on them. Right, now we all agree we need to do something. Let's start with this. What would happen if we did do nothing? Shout out to George. He said he's had data bullied out of him over the years. That may have been that may be me as well. So I'm sorry, George, if I bullied it out of you. But yeah, he made in the comments. There's a huge gap between those strategy statements and people able to implement them. And that's a really good point, actually. There's lots of people that can talk the talk, but when it comes down to actual activities needed to deliver that, people don't really know where to start. And probably that's why most people just go back to, I'm just going to build a technology. Here's a technology blueprint, because that's what they understand. But to actually work out what's the right thing to do at the right time, that's going to cost the right amount, that's going to give you the right amount of ROI, and to do that in a cost-effective path is a skill.
Yeah, and it relates a lot to that buy, build, partner discussion that takes place. And before I was at Henry Schein, I was at FactSet. I mean, FactSet is a data company. Data, information, and insights are the product that they provide, in addition to a number of workflow tools for financial services organizations. But we had a pretty extensive partner strategy, and always kind of looked at things through that lens of buy, build, partner. And there's a lot of different merits for each. And I've seen across other organizations, there's just a lot of that blueprinting that goes on, and kind of, I don't want to call it analysis paralysis. I think there gets to a point where there's no analysis even left. But it's to your point, it's a lot of talk and very little action. And sometimes having that right action approach and sort of agile approach to be able to innovate quickly is kind of what end up separating winners from losers of entire companies.
Yeah, no, it's that. If you go with that full, you do the full procrastination, don't do anything at all, and or not worry about anything. And the other one is, you have a clear view of what your technology strategy is, but not understanding whether it's a fit for your organisation. What is what actually the business needs to deliver now, and 6 months down the line, you're still building this thing, and the technology's moved on, the people moved on, or you're moved on because you haven't delivered. So it is a skill and an art of working out the right approach. Sorry, hold on. Right, got it. We touched on data products a minute ago. And actually, a shout out to Andre, and I'm probably pronouncing his surname correctly, but I'm just reading his book at the moment. I'll get it. I'll just grab it. It's about managing. Go through it.
There we go. Managing data as a product.
Yeah, that's it. You got there in the end, anyway. And
We'll post it in the comments after.
We will. So, and yeah, I may not pronounce Andrea's name correctly, so I'll put it in there as well. But yeah, it's this term data products been bashed around for a little while now, and I've had some purist views it in the past, but I do think it's a movement that there's a more positive out of it than any negative, and I think it is a way of helping us think in a more of a feature-based way of delivering a product as we would in the other worlds, but just a data-focused one. So what's your when you're talking about data products, what's your definition of a data product?
Yeah, so the first companies I worked at in the data space, as I mentioned, like data was their product, or really information and insights derived from data was the product. And so, as a result of that being our core business, it made us always think through things from more of a product lens, and where you'd see sort of traditional product management frameworks in play. At the end of the day, though, it's like, what are you ultimately trying to do? What's the decision that you're making? What's the magnitude of that decision, the frequency of that decision? How are you looking at that? Like, all of this can be summed up very similar to how you would approach creating any technical product, or even non-technical product. And so I've always been a big fan of sort of that product-based thinking around the approach to data, even if that's just for internal analytics. That's all going somewhere. It's being utilized by someone. There's a user experience that you have to think about. Even if that user experience is an executive team receiving an email with some insights, it's really important to kind of understand downstream, how are those being used, why are those important. Even things like how granular and accurate do I need to get. There's a lot of, not to say don't be accurate, of course you want to be accurate, but if you there's sort of call it the 90% that you do, and after that things just take an sort of exponentially increasing amount of time to get more refined. And there's certain times where you need to understand, when is something good enough that you can make a decision off of it and move on and spend your time on other things. So I think when you look at a lot of product management, there's a project management component to it, which is all about time and time efficiency, that I think is really important. I haven't read the book yet. I'm going to certainly add it to my list, or maybe you'll gift it for me for my birthday. But I'm excited to check that out, because I do think in a lot of organizations, when you look at data as a product, and you start to see there are more and more roles of heads of data product, VP of data product, whether that product is something that faces externally or internally within an organization, or kind of combination of both. Again, it is sort of putting on that strategic, it's a product strategy lens that you're looking at, and making sure everything's aligned with the overall corporate strategy.
And you made a good point there of when something's ready to go out there, just good enough. And I think I saw that on Instagram. It was someone I follow, and it was talking about if you wait until you're 100% happy with the product by the time you launch it, your first launch, you've launched too late.
Yeah.
So if you wait until right, that's brilliant, that's perfect. Oh, I've already lost the race now. Everyone else has already got out there. So, and it's tough though sometimes, because you have a vision of what something looks like. You think, I can just add something else in, or just add this thing in. But it's to be able to keep yourself real and say, okay, right, that's enough. Let's just get it out for now, and still know that you would want to do more, but just get that first version out, because I think people don't like criticism, and then they could do this, they could have done that.
Yeah, and you have to iterate. You have to listen to customer feedback, and chances are, whatever you do, even if you do finish something to 100%, once you actually take it to market, you're going to get feedback and need to change things. And so, all that extra time that you spent on something may have not even been worthwhile, because you may have to actually go and unwind that. And I think in very large corporations, there is some of that room for error and that room for iterating, but sort of fast forwarding within my own career working on a startup, if you spend too much time on some of those things, like there's an existential risk to the company, that you run out of funding, or you
Yeah.
you know whatever it is. And I think when I look at, I see a lot on LinkedIn. You and I interact on LinkedIn and share some banter back and forth all the time. But I see a lot of kind of advice, whether it's from sales leaders telling people how to sell, or startup folks or VCs telling people how to build companies. And the thing that I'm never really seeing is what I think is actually the bigger issue for most startups is they forget to build a business. They focus so much time on, am I going to be product led and go for PLG, or am I going to be a SaaS company? What's my commercial model going to be? And they forget to actually build a business and take a product to market and then iterate from there. And I've seen it a lot in the financial data space, because there's a lot of sort of, call it like, we call them science projects, where a lot of talent, a lot of technical talent behind something, but failure to actually build a business and understand the customer market is usually what ends up killing a lot of these companies.
So yeah, I totally agree. So going back to, is it LiveRamp? Was it LiveRamp or no? Lives. Which was the data company you worked at?
That I was at FactSet, yeah.
FactSet, yeah. Sorry,
I think there's been a few LiveRamp folks on your show, and we were talking about Ethan's happy hour. So.
That was it, yeah. So it was Ethan's a LiveRamp guy. So working at FactSet, it's, from my understanding, very similar to any other data aggregators that are selling data for you to make decisions on. And how do you? And this is something that I've been talking to with George, actually, who's just good comments on there, is how you make that data valuable, how you make it better than your competitors, and also it's very difficult to evidence the value of the data that you're selling to someone until they start using it. And the issue is when they start using it and it all auto magically has all the answers they want. You think that's brilliant, but then you go to reality and think, hold on, the historical data I've got was much more accurate than the data I'm getting every day. So maybe there were corrections that could have been made historically. How do we deal with? How's the industry deal with making it easier for companies to be confident that the data that they're buying is accurate, timely, quality, without having to, maybe go for long POCs to go and validate this data for themselves?
Yeah, so having been on both sides of the table of selling data, but also probably more of my experience has been on acquiring data and acquiring different analytics products from companies. Some of that is on the buyer. That's part of their job, is to understand how this fits into their organization. But I think the key thing is just transparency. The more people are open about, there are plenty of aggregators upon aggregators in the world of like data brokers. I don't necessarily need to know. I know my compliance person may want to know what's the full lineage of that in terms of who are the companies, where the proper rights gained along the way. But from a use case standpoint, I don't always need to know the name of the company that something is derived from, but I need to understand the methodology of the collection and of the processing of that data. And I think most questions that end up coming from data buyers are around that. It's helped me understand, so I can put it into context, how you capture this information, or what type of information this is sourced from, and then and also understanding things like the update cadence, understanding, does someone clean that data or do anything to model that data, or are they just sending it right through? And what I found, I think it's getting a bit better, but if I go back, say, 5 years ago, a lot of companies were very guarded around this. They thought that was their secret sauce and that people would go out and just acquire this data on their own. That's actually extremely expensive and time consuming. Like, I would much rather go to someone who aggregates many different data sources and brings them together. But I think understanding the different methodologies, so, my key advice for everyone is just the more transparent that you can be, the better, and allowing people to actually see that in action. At the end of the day, it depends on what their use case is, how they're going to look at testing that. an investment firm, for example, will often want to run a pretty large back test and get kind of a full historical cut from a certain time frame of the data, and maybe even trial something out on an ongoing update basis for a certain amount of weeks or months. Others may not need to do as extensive testing, or may be able to look at a sample of, say, 100 records, and they just want to see, hey, what if it's enrichment? What can you send me on these 100 records, so that I can understand the sort of shape and format and the context of the data. So the actual testing, I think, just goes back to transparency and understanding the end customer. And at the end of the day, proving the value, sometimes the buyer doesn't even know how to value a lot of these things. And so that's another challenge that they're facing. And so the healthier the relationship, the more transparent the relationship, I think the more you can help them build that argument for why they need something, because there are companies that buy data from 2,000 different sources. It's very difficult to figure out the value of any of those individual sources, and might not always be worth the investment. Going back to that 90% of the way there, that's probably good enough to understand what kind of value something is bringing. Beyond that, you're probably getting diminishing returns and facing opportunity costs.
So, and I've just made some notes of some great things that you covered there. And one of them was, understanding the value of the data you're actually subscribing to when you've got all of these different feeds you're bringing in. It's really difficult, and I think if you assess every single data feed on its own merit, it may not give you what the sum is of an aggregated, like if I've used 4 of these feeds together, the sum of those gives me a much more accurate decisioning process that is getting a higher success rate.
Well, what's the line? The whole is greater than the sum of the parts, I think it is, if I'm not mistaken on that. And I always used to describe it with partnerships as we look for a 1 + 1 = 3 equation.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes hard to define. And by the way, that's not to say don't understand the value of any individual data feed. There is something you need to be doing to make sure that you're not overpaying or wasting time or making potentially bad decisions off of bad data. But I think to your point, it's really looking at how does it all come together, and then making sure that you're keeping the right tabs on. Is there something we can be doing better in a certain area? Kind of like with code. And I say that as someone who doesn't write a single line of code, but there are times where you need to check certain areas of code, and you may want to update something. There are other times where you say, you know what, that's working, I don't need to do it. And then there's other times where you look at the bigger picture of how it all comes together. And that's what actually ends up highlighting that there may be problems with a certain area in your code.
Yeah, and the other thing about it is the trust factor. If people start trusting the data or trusting the relationship, knowing where that data is being sourced, you're going to get a better relationship. But I think there's a commercial. Obviously, we live in a very commercial world at the moment, and everyone needs to make money, and some people will try and take the opportunities to probably make more than maybe they should, which comes into this trust factor. Is if you're able to, if the client's ever say, this is how I'm using this data and this is the benefit it gives me, it may mean that the supplier, oh my God, you're making that much money off that data, I'm going to put my price up. Whereas the flip side round is, if you're not able to implement it, you could be using this data and you're paying money and you're not getting any value from it at all. So I think it is very important to understand how your data is used and the benefits it provides, but maybe not be transparent of how much benefit it provides when negotiating with suppliers. But what's your view on that, Dan? Because you're the other side of the table.
So I'm going to relate this one to the investment firms again, and this actually goes all the way back even to my expert network days, where any service selling into investment firms, there's been different pricing ranging from, some like to price based on assets under management. Some people like to, if they read that a fund that they sell to had really stellar performance one year, they try to go in and say, well, you made this much more money, you should give us more. And I don't think there's anything like, depending on what you don't walk into a restaurant and depending on what your net worth is, they charge you differently.
Yes. No.
And the other part of it is, and why I bring up investment firms, is investment firms can have a major loss in a year. And one of my favorite ones, I actually witnessed this a while back, where someone tried to charge a fund more because they had really good performance. And the person on the other side of the table said, okay, if you want to do that, we can do that. But if I lose money next year, are you going to pay me? And it just ended the conversation right there. And I haven't really seen that come up since then. So there's all different types of strategies, I think, around, how do you price things, and I think in some companies there are people who do it really effectively. There's probably too much time and analysis and thinking and headcount spent on trying to squeeze a little bit more out of each customer that I'd probably argue, it'd be better off if you just set a price, we're transparent about it. So we could have a whole separate discussion about value and pricing, or value-based pricing is the term that often gets used. But I think it's a tricky one, and every business is going to be a little bit different. One way I like to look at it is like, how much do you save by doing something? Mm-hmm. And to tie back to what I'm working on now, I haven't even told you all about AggKnowledge yet, but we do a lot of the work for people so that they don't have to do these things. And we do understand the quality and the value of individual data sets and spend a lot of time doing that, so that our customers don't have to do that. And so while we do have the ability to justify kind of top line growth and ROI for our customers, and we've been very fortunate that people who started working with us have shared back with us how they've seen a lot of those improvements and growth. A lot of it is also on the cost side, and that cost is, things like data licensing from multiple sources. You're not getting the best unit economics, all the integration time and technology management, the cleaning of data. And then another one is the opportunity cost of, is this something you should be focused on? And so, I always try to price fairly on things, and but make sure that it's very clear to people that they're either, they're going to gain revenue, save money, or ideally both.
Yeah, I think that's a good way. If you're able to, and I do sales and marketing at my company, so it's you do need to be able to have a good story to allow that sales activity to happen. But I think the other one is making sure that you're back to that trusting or being able to be reassured that someone's not doing a different price or a different one depending on what use case they've got. If you know that you're just making a fair margin and that margin is shared across everyone, then they're happy. You're making enough money. You need to make sure that the price you'll charge them, the customers make money with it as well, and everyone's getting their fair share. So, but it's a good point.
I've seen data sets that funds have paid $500,000 for, and then there's another client paying $50,000 for the same thing. And the issue usually comes to a head when one person leaves the one of the funds and goes to the other. And so that's the other thing, is kind of future-proofing your pricing model, looking at things. If my pricing became transparent to people, would some of my customers be upset? And I think in a lot of cases, the answer is yes, from what I've seen out there. I think something core to my business, we have a pretty standardized pricing table that we look at to make sure that we're getting people what they need, that we believe they're going to have the right ROI, and this can be a really good long-term relationship. And the difference in price usually depends on the needs of people, as opposed to just like for like the same product coming up with two different price points because we think we can get a couple of dollars extra from one versus the other.
And I think it's that reputational risk, isn't it? So you get a bad name, it sticks, and one partner goes to another company, and they'll go to a competitor that's even if they're paid the same price, they'll just do it because you've left a bad taste in their mouth when using them. But you talked about what you're doing at your Ag Data, and share a little bit more about how you're helping companies with your service.
Yeah, sure. So we as I mentioned in the beginning, I started off my career in expert networks, the very qualitative form of research, and then spent the past 6 years or so in data. And this is kind of combining the two halves of my career. And so what we are is a data management and enrichment service that's purpose-built for what we call knowledge networks. So those are anyone who reaches out to people based on their professional experience and expertise. So that's expert networks, market research firms, survey panel providers, even headhunters and recruiters is another area that we've seen a lot of activity, is all of these firms are managing a large database of people and some professional attributes about their experience or the companies that they work at. And what ends up happening is in many cases, it's kind of, I liken this to like a CRM for sales and marketing purposes. In most cases, people load in a record of someone, and then that record becomes static. Now, there may be other activities that are updated, but the actual record of where someone works, what they do, next thing you know, that person leaves the company, goes to another company, and a different salesperson picks it up and creates a new record. Now you have a duplicate problem of the same underlying person, but not necessarily the knowledge that that person was a customer before, or the relationship as you follow them throughout their career. And the same thing kind of happens on the what I call like the supply side of the industry. So all the candidates for recruitment firms, as well as the people seeking to commercialize their knowledge and expertise through surveys or expert calls, is that data usually sits static and isn't up to date and kind of programmatically up to date. The ongoing maintenance ends up being a very manual process of people going online and looking at online professional profiles and then typing that in and updating that manually. And so on one hand, we set out to solve for the static data problem, and make it much more dynamic and programmatic of keeping updates. But then it's about really about the enrichment. So once we know, where someone works and what their title is, now we start to look at, well, the company that they work at, what do they actually do? Who do they compete with? What are the products and services that they provide? Then if it's a very common thing in market research is to get customer perspectives on something. They're looking to do a survey of 300 IT architects on name your technology or part of the tech stack. And being able to understand, like, there's tons of third-party data out there that can be licensed or in many cases even pulled down as free and publicly available, that can help inform that, so that you can do better targeting. Rather than reach out to 1,000 people in hopes that you get 300, you can actually significantly reduce the amount of people that you need to reach out to by being more targeted with the right data enrichment. And so we look at it as people, companies, and vendors are sort of the standard three areas. We bring it all together, we clean it, we stitch it all together. People don't need to get this from multiple sources. And then industry-specific applications. And in many areas, we also use a waterfall methodology. And what I mean by that is we work with multiple data providers of the same type of data and kind of go through and do different checks, because we found that a lot of things are panel-based or not comprehensive in terms of their coverage or update of the entire universe. And so we work with multiple providers in each category, and we'll sort of go through and look at provider A. If provider A doesn't have an updated record or a record at all, automatically move to provider B. And so what our customers get is something that's comprehensive and also
So let me just play that back. So you like put an abstraction layer in to where the data is. You tell it what sort of data you want, and you can like say, well, hold on, that's not the best quality, that's a bit out of date, or that's a bit. I've swapped that round to the latest provider of that without you having to do anything at all.
Yeah, the end user doesn't see that. They make an API call, and in that API call process, it's running through that waterfall and doing those checks to make sure that data is the most up to date along the
way. And are you providing feedback of where that which data source you actually use for that data to go back, so you can.
It honestly, it hasn't really come up as a necessity. We know where it comes from, and part of that is how we partner. We have a very healthy relationship with the data providers that we work with, and they get paid if their data is used. And so that's actually now an incentive for them to improve their data overall. And so we'll tell them, like, if we see certain gaps in someone's data set, we have a very healthy, friendly relationship with all of our data providers, give them a lot of feedback so that they can improve their product, which benefits us and our customers, but also it benefits them because now they may always be that move to that provider A slot, and we never need to go through to B, C, and D. And so the incentive is kind of naturally baked in there that they want to be providing the most accurate, the most complete, and the most up to date data.
I suppose the only thought on that is the customers don't know all the great work that's happening then. They go, oh, you just get this data all the time. They don't really know that, by the way, if you'd just gone to that one supplier, you would have only had 20% of the data you've got. It's the ability to mix, match, and go around that's giving you the coverage you've got. So it's actually.
That discussion takes place in the initial sale. That's part of the initial sale. Is you can go to all these providers, but I don't think really anyone's going to go and license like 4 different providers within the same category. That doesn't make sense for them to do. And the data providers don't want to offer something like that has an unknown of how much consumption there's going to be. So working with us, we kind of handle that for them. And all they have to do is keep providing, as most accurate and up to date data as possible to us, and then we sort of take it from there and help them bring it to market and commercialize it.
It's very, very good. I hadn't quite realised that from our previous conversation, so I'm generally impressed actually live on the show. So, and talk about.
I'll send you over a proposal and an invoice later.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure, no problem at all. I just won't sign it. You're talking about and this is so I know it's quantum systematic, and So, what's the big difference between quantum systematic approaches?
Yeah, I think when we were talking the other day about it, it was sort of quant and systematic versus like a fundamental research process. And I think what made me bring it up there, those are terms frequently used in the investment world and sort of types of strategies for hedge funds. But what I like to tie it back to is actually the term data-driven decision making and companies saying that they're data-driven in all of their decisions. And this goes back a little bit to some of my gripes on companies in general when they talk about their use of data. But I think sometimes there's a mindset that data has to be used to actually like make the decision, carry it out, and it must be entirely based on data. And that's just not the way most companies work. I mean, most people are still just going off of intuition and talking to their colleagues and bringing it all together. Like when I look at the investment landscape, there's a quantitative or systematic strategy, which is very math-based, very data-driven, and you're using kind of math and data and technology to actually inform and carry out that trading process. But the more funds that people are, I think, generally familiar with are doing fundamental research. They're talking to management teams. They're conducting expert calls. They're using data sets. They're reading broker research. Like they always refer to it as this mosaic process. And I think in the sort of general business world as well, or general corporate world, that ends up being the more effective strategy in a lot of ways. Like data should absolutely be an important input, and the insights you're obviously better off if they can be derived from underlying like core empirical data. But it's not the only thing. Like what actually goes into that decision of how do you act on something, it's not the only thing that goes into that. And sometimes I think, especially when you're looking towards the future, what's the line that like all the law firms, investment firms use, that past success doesn't guarantee future results. There may be some things that about the market or about your buyers or about the competition that may make some of that historical data not as valuable to just follow at face value. So I think a lot of times it's important to know it, it's important to understand it, but it's also important to look at something and say, is this going to have an impact on this decision, or is this going to have an impact on our business performance moving forward or not, and what's kind of the magnitude of that impact. And so that's what when we were talking the other day about that, what I was getting at was just kind of relating it to different investment strategies. I think relate very closely to different corporate strategies as well.
So, and it's all like having human in the loop from that. It's saying, okay, I've got this data, but I know with my current knowledge that I've got of some scandal maybe happening in that company, or some movement of someone who's going to be leaving that company soon, or whatever that insight you've got that negates the data that's there is, it's really good to have that human. Well, we've still got a role, haven't we? Then, if there's human in the loop, and we haven't been totally replaced.
For now, we do. I don't think I've let AI do something for me entirely yet and carry out that process. I use some form of AI probably every day, whether that's to build different data products, to clean data, I probably should use it more to write different online posts and things like that, speed up the process. But everything that I do, like I would never let something just publish something for me.
Yeah.
And I think we've both seen that there's been some AI bots online that will comment on our posts, and
yes,
you can read like right through it. You can see right away they all follow the same template, which makes me think: is this even AI, or is this just a structured template that someone uses with some personalization tokens in it? And the same thing with a lot of the AI powered sales emails that I get, which we both get dozens a week from different companies. You can like tell exactly which ones are written by AI. And so I think there's a tremendous opportunity, but I'm not at the point yet where I've let anything AI powered carry out the entire end-to-end process and then reach out on my behalf.
I did see something on social media the other day where, we do always see these automated comments on there, and they are very transparent and they do have a certain pattern. But someone had sent someone out a sales one, and they replied back and they say, "Thank you, I am interested. Thank you for the approach. But your bot you're using lacks depth and warmth." And and anyway, the guy replied back saying, I'm autistic, and I didn't I actually wrote it. I hand wrote it myself. I didn't use Gen AI.
That's
so yeah.
That's a tricky one. So I think maybe people also need to be careful in how they're responding back and how rapid fire how trigger happy they are to respond back to some of these things. I mean, I look at some of them as an opportunity for what we do. I mean, I actually relating back to why we started this business. I received probably 5 or 6 expertise requests, either in the form of surveys, expert calls, or even headhunters and recruiters reaching out probably every day. And that experience, it just became something where I had answered a lot of these questions before, or there were things people should know about my company. Like we have 4 people at AggKnowledge. I receive requests all the time where on the 7th or 8th screener question, I screen out because I didn't work at a company with 1,000 or more people, and things like that I would argue that they should know about me.
Yeah.
And so I end up doing that a lot within the realm of market research and expert-based research. I can reply to these things and say, hey, just FYI, what data did you have on me that made it seem like you should be reaching out to me? And I see a lot of it with some of the sales tools for like contact information as well, where they'll go back to someone and say, hey, you reached out to me, but you reach out to an old email address. You must not be using the latest contact information. Here's what we do. So sometimes you can turn it into a good sales opportunity for sure.
Really good. It's really good. So we're getting towards the end as well. I'm just looking to see if we've covered everything really. Is there anything else you want to bring up while we're here today?
Well, Chris, I'd like to get you talking. I think you have an event in London this week. Would definitely like to get a plug out there for that, and also tell me a little bit more about the Winter Data Conference as well.
Oh, I'm glad you asked. Yes, you're right. I do have a London this Thursday is the low key data meetup that we host. Is our monthly occurrence of it, and then you're right. We're heading to the Winter Data Conference, which is the best and only Winter Data Conference.
It's also the worst.
Yeah, I know. It's the best and worst, but no, we've got a great lineup of speakers there and topics. lovely locations in San Jose in Austria. Yeah, got Google sponsoring it as well. It was a bit of a it's always a challenge. I think I call it like the triangle of dependencies. And so like, you know, people want to know who'll sponsor it, who's coming, people who's coming, go, who's talking. You know, it's like just try and get everyone agreed. It was like herding cats, but we got there in the end. Yeah, I'm really pleased with what we got to talk about. We could do more snow though.
Well, it looks awesome. I think everyone will have a great time. I'm sad I can't make it. I will have to block off my calendar earlier next year, and would love to attend because it really looks like an awesome event. And if anyone isn't familiar with it, check it out. It's on Chris's LinkedIn, and I have it in my newsletter as well, and on the upcoming events. And this week, I think I will be at the OG low key data happy hour organized by Ethan Aaron on 14th Street in Manhattan. So, Chris, I know you'll be hosting one across the pond, but looking forward to seeing you at the next one, and looking forward to seeing everyone there this week as well.
Yeah, I'll be back for the one. Yeah, later on. Yeah, but Ethan's one in March. I'll be there for, and Jordan's as well. I seem to go to those ones nowadays as well. Yeah. So, it's a. Yeah, getting my fill of New York data meetups. Right, well, we'll probably call it a bit of a wrap for today. Then I think we've covered everything. It's been a great topic, or great topics covered. Dan, if people want to get a hold of you, where can they find you apart from at the meetups?
Yeah, so newsletter, always appreciate any subscribers. It's pronunciated.beehive.com. Shoot me a connection request on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. And then Dan at AggKnowledge, AggKnowledge.ai is my email. Be sure to check out our site as well. But always excited to talk with anyone about especially the future of expert-based research and market research and how data can play a role in that. But Chris, as you know, I'm kind of a geek for all things data, not data. Yeah, thanks so much for having me on, and looking forward to continuing the conversation.
No, always a pleasure. I say it seemed a shame to not let everyone hear these great conversations we have.
Well, I was going to say this I think is actually our first scheduled time to chat, and we've probably talked for dozens of hours at this point, and it's always we see each other at a happy hour, we end up going off and just talking about some data related things. So it's exciting to have something actually.
We had some structure to it for once, which is good. It was good. Normally it's unstructured conversations we have.
Exactly.
All right, Dan. Well, I'll catch up with you soon. Thanks again for being on the show. I don't think there's no show next week because I'm skiing in preparation for the Window Conference. Yeah. So apologies about that. But the week after, I have to work out who's doing the show. But yes, watch that space. All right, Dan. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris.
We'll call that a wrap. Thanks, audience.
Take care, everyone.